I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched 35 McMansions turn into lakefront property. The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they could take my grandfather's farm while I was deployed in Afghanistan. These pompous bureaucrats built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land, complete with tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golf carts. What they didn't know was that I'm an Army Corps engineer. That little earth dam on my property had been waiting 45 years for someone careless enough to build downstream. The boldness was astonishing until the spillway gates opened and their luxury development felt the first taste of natural flooding. The satisfaction was going to be immense. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment, because you're about to see the most stunning HOA takedown involving federal water law and gravity. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jake Morrison, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin. My grandfather, Pops, bought this property back in 1955 when Austin was still a small college town and barbecue joints outnumbered tech companies by about 1,000 to 1. Pops believed in taking care of the land and neighbors. In 1978, he built a small earth dam, nothing fancy, just solid engineering to collect rainwater for cattle and help downstream neighbors during dry seasons. The Army Corps even guided him on the design. Pops always said that someday the back 40 acres would be worth something special, but for now it was just rolling hills where we ran cattle and I learned to hunt. Then came my 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure. Turns out, building wells and controlling water in a war zone teaches you how valuable clean water is and how quickly people will fight over it. While I was on my second tour, Pops passed away. The property went into a trust managed by my sister Sarah in California, who knew as much about Texas land law as I know about surfing. She hired a local company, Lone Star Land Services, to handle taxes and upkeep. Taxes were paid automatically, but she never actually looked at the assessments. Big mistake.
Enter our villain, Margaret Cap Maggie Thornwell, 52, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA. She drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis clothes like formal business wear. Maggie's sweetness had a passive-aggressive bite that Southern women perfect around 45, smiling while stabbing you in the back and somehow making it feel like a favor. She's married to City Councilman Rick Thornwell, which explains a lot. Maggie had a reputation for neighborhood beautification, which really meant forcing anyone who didn't fit her vision out. The smell of her fancy perfume couldn't hide the cloud of entitlement that followed her. I came home in August 2023, ready to spend time on Pop's land. Driving down the old gravel road past the oak tree where I carved my initials as a kid, I expected to see rolling pastures and the sparkling dam. Instead, there were construction crews, concrete trucks, and survey stakes across my back 40. The crunch of gravel under my boots felt different, angrier. I marched up to the foreman. "Sorry, buddy," he said, not looking sorry. "We got permits. This is Willowbrook Estates property."
I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived and explained uncomfortably that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. If land sits unused and someone improves it, they can sometimes claim ownership. It's an old law, but developers and HOAs love it. That's when Maggie appeared in her golf cart, a suburban warlord. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said, smiling. "We're just putting it to good use." Her tone made me want to check my wallet. Then I saw her crews had diverted the creek feeding Pop's dam. The water level was dropping daily, destroying 45 years of careful management. As I watched, Maggie's parting words echoed. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." That's when I knew this wasn't about land anymore. This was war. I hired the first attorney I found. Big mistake.
He quoted $85,000 just to challenge zoning changes. While I served overseas, Rick had pushed through emergency zoning modifications, changing our land from agricultural to residential development. My Army Corps training kicked in. While the lawyer shuffled papers, I dug through county records like I was hunting IEDs. I found Pop's 1978 dam permits. Pops had worked directly with the Army Corps on flood control and watershed management, which meant federal jurisdiction. That little dam couldn't be overwritten by a local HOA. The metallic taste of adrenaline hit me. This wasn't just property, it was federal. Then I stumbled on a 1923 water rights deed. My great-grandfather had senior water rights to Willow Creek, older than the city, older than the county, older than all those McMansions. They weren't just stealing land, they were stealing water. Meanwhile, Maggie played the victim. She organized an emergency HOA meeting about dangerous dam structure with a local news crew she tipped off. "We're concerned about children," she said, dabbing her eyes. The news didn't check the dam's last safety inspection, which had passed with flying colors. Maggie posted warnings on Nextdoor about unstable individuals, hinting at me without naming me. In a town that small, everyone knew exactly who she meant. The smell of diesel mixed with cedar pollen as I watched crews build double shifts. Every night, the water level dropped another inch. I called Tony Riggs, an Army buddy now at the EPA. 20 minutes with Tony taught me more about environmental law than 3 hours with that expensive lawyer. If they were diverting a natural waterway without federal permits, that was a Clean Water Act violation. My dam had federal jurisdiction. I started documenting everything: trail cameras, time-stamped photos, flow measurements at 3 creek points. Sarah begged me to take the money and walk away, but this was no longer about money. It was about gravel under illegal boots, Maggie's heels on courthouse marble, bitter coffee during research sessions, and most of all, Pop's dam. Pops built it to help the community during dry seasons. Maggie's crew was...
In Texas, water rights are older than oil or mineral rights, but you need to fight for them. Maggie turned up the heat. She organized a neighborhood safety patrol. HOA board members photographing every visitor, writing down license plates, filing reports with the sheriff. Harassment included loud music complaints, citations for minor infractions, and even a wellness check through veteran services. Building inspectors, fire marshals, health officials all arrived the same day. They cited minor violations. I recognized the tactic from war zones: pressure, bureaucracy, overwhelm. Two can play that game. Tony at the EPA was interested in the creek diversion. It required federal environmental clearance. Fines start at $50,000 per day. The smell of curing concrete reminded me time was short. I discovered the development was in a 100-year floodplain. Insurance companies initially refused coverage until the HOA provided a flood mitigation plan, diverting the creek away from their new homes to flood my property. Insurance fraud in development can be criminal, not just civil. Maggie had done this before in Houston, paying a $2.3 million EPA fine for the same scheme. She was repeating history. While she spread rumors about my mental health, I built alliances. I partnered with Mrs. Chen, whose garden withered from water loss, and Miguel Santos, whose family farm had been rezoned years ago. These were part of a systematic land grab. Every morning, machinery shook the farmhouse. Every evening, I documented water theft. I also prepared water flow meters, exact measurements, 1,200 gallons per day, $47,000 annual agricultural value. Then the city planned to seize my property through eminent domain. The HOA offered $180,000 for land, valued at $890,000. Sarah laughed at Maggie's attempt to manipulate her in California. I refused. The fight was just getting started. I found Pop's journals and the original dam covenant: maintain natural seasonal flow to preserve downstream agricultural water rights in perpetuity. This wasn't just permission, it was legal obligation. Amanda Cross, environmental lawyer, joined me. We formed a coalition with downstream farmers. Historical evidence proved creek diversion destroyed generational farming. My engineering plan was precise: controlled release, gradual increase, peak flow timed perfectly. Warning signs were posted, volunteers notified. Amanda contacted reporters, Miguel arranged community witnesses. This was a carefully orchestrated operation, not reckless.
The morning we activated the controlled release, the air smelled like wet earth and cedar. I arrived at the dam at 5:30 a.m., coffee in hand, camera ready. Amanda Cross and Tony Riggs were there, along with 5 volunteers from the neighborhood who were tired of Maggie's tyranny. We opened the spillway gates slowly, monitoring flow rates. Every second mattered. Too fast, and downstream farmers would flood. Too slow, and Maggie would have more time to cover her tracks. By 8 a.m., the water had reached the lower pastures, filling dried creek beds and helping irrigate Miguel's failing crops. Neighbors peeked over fences, some in shock, others in disbelief. The HOA, which had mocked me relentlessly for months, now faced an inconvenient truth. Federal water rights aren't suggestions, they're law. Margaret Thornwell arrived in her BMW X7, eyes wide, yelling about illegal flooding. I stayed calm. Tony had already called the EPA field office. Within an hour, federal inspectors arrived, cameras in hand, taking notes and verifying flow measurements against the legal deed from 1923. Maggie tried to argue, waving her hands like she was conducting an orchestra of chaos, but Tony and Amanda calmly explained her violations: creek diversion, destruction of natural flow, federal water law infringement. Her voice faltered. By noon, the story hit local news. Headlines read, "Suburban HOA under fire for illegal water diversion. Army engineer returns home to protect family land," and Willowbrook Estates faces federal investigation. Neighbors who had quietly suffered watched in disbelief as the evidence became public. The narrative flipped. Maggie's perfect neighborhood image cracked like dry concrete. The sheriff's office had been hesitant before, caught between HOA influence and legal obligations, but with federal inspectors on site, their hands were tied. Maggie tried to rally her board members to block access, but letters of violation and the presence of news crews made it impossible. One by one, her allies backed down, leaving her looking like a tyrant. I spent the next 3 weeks documenting every inch of land, recording flow rates, taking photos of damaged crops, and logging HOA actions. Amanda Cross filed a civil complaint for water rights violations and harassment. Tony Riggs made sure the EPA investigation documented environmental interference. The case grew bigger than any of us anticipated. Maggie's previous offenses came back into focus, proving a pattern of illegal activity. In court, the HOA tried the usual tactics: intimidation, bureaucracy, fake affidavits from residents claiming the dam was unsafe. Amanda dismantled every claim, using Pop's engineering notes, Army Corps approvals, and federal water law precedents. I testified calmly, presenting evidence of diverted flow, showing spreadsheets of daily measurements, rainfall data, and creek bed maps. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense reputation, listened intently. Maggie's theatrics were meaningless here. Law, evidence, and historical deeds. The ruling was decisive. The court recognized my senior water rights and restored full control of the dam to my family. Willowbrook Estates was ordered to stop any further construction on the disputed land, restore natural water flow, and pay restitution to affected neighbors. Federal authorities added fines for environmental violations, sending a clear message: no HOA, no matter how entitled, can override legal water rights. Community reaction was incredible. Mrs. Chen's garden flourished again, Miguel's crops recovered, and neighbors who had felt powerless finally felt vindicated. Some came to apologize for doubting me, admitting they were scared of Maggie's social power. I accepted their apologies quietly. Victory wasn't just personal, it was communal. Maggie and Rick Thornwell tried to appeal, but lacked standing. The public exposure of their behavior had cost them credibility in both social and political circles. Willowbrook Estates faced restructuring with a temporary federal oversight board to ensure future compliance. I didn't celebrate by gloating. Instead, I spent time restoring the dam, repairing erosion, and planting native vegetation along the creek. The land was not just mine, it was my family's legacy. Sarah, who had been hesitant the entire time, finally visited in person. She walked the property with me, seeing the creek full, the dam stable, and wildlife returning. "Jake," she said, "I think Pops would be proud." I smiled, feeling the weight of generations behind me. The fight had been long and intense, but the land, the water, and the community were safe. After everything, I decided to document the story for HOA Prime Stories, sharing every detail so that other homeowners could learn from our experience. Knowledge is power. Water rights, federal jurisdiction, HOA overreach, these are lessons too few people understand until it's too late. People often assume their HOA is on their side, but history and legal records show.
Maggie and Rick Thornwell tried to appeal but lacked standing. The public exposure of their behavior had cost them credibility in both social and political circles. Willowbrook Estates faced restructuring with a temporary federal oversight board to ensure future compliance. I didn't celebrate by gloating. Instead, I spent time restoring the dam, repairing erosion, and planting native vegetation along the creek. The land was not just mine, it was my family's legacy. Sarah, who had been hesitant the entire time, finally visited in person. She walked the property with me, seeing the creek full, the dam stable, and wildlife returning. "Jake," she said, "I think Pops would be proud." I smiled, feeling the weight of generations behind me. The fight had been long and intense, but the land, the water, and the community were safe. After everything, I decided to document the story for HOA Prime Stories, sharing every detail so that other homeowners could learn from our experience. Knowledge is power. Water rights, federal jurisdiction, HOA overreach, these are lessons too few people understand until it's too late. People often assume their HOA is on their side, but history and legal records show otherwise. The final weeks were spent undoing damage. Crews restored natural water paths, soil was replaced where diverted flow had caused erosion, and vegetation planted to stabilize banks. The dam, which had been neglected and threatened, became a model of historical preservation. Volunteers returned, inspired to protect their own properties. Local schools even arranged field trips to show students the importance of environmental engineering and civic vigilance.
Maggie Thornwell moved away shortly after losing the case, her reputation irreparably damaged. News outlets followed her departure, framing it as the fall of a small-town autocrat. Willowbrook Estates had to rebuild, not just physically, but socially. Transparency became mandatory in HOA meetings, with federal oversight of water management now in place. Looking back, I realized this fight wasn't just about land or water. It was about standing up against bullying, protecting family legacy, and respecting the environment. It was about making sure that bureaucrats and entitled HOA members learned that rules, law, and community matter more than their convenience. Now, every morning, I walk along the creek, listening to the water ripple over rocks, watching birds return, seeing the reflection of the sky in the restored pond. The land feels alive again. It's quiet, but powerful. I sometimes think of Pops, imagining him smiling at the creek, proud that his work and his values survived.
For anyone watching this on HOA Prime Stories, remember, know your rights, document everything, and never underestimate the power of history and law. Small communities can have big battles, and even the most entitled HOA can be stopped when evidence, preparation, and determination meet. Life has returned to normal, but vigilance is key.
HOAs exist to manage communities, not to steal legacies. I've learned to balance vigilance with patience, understanding that knowledge, preparation, and courage are tools more powerful than resentment. And when the water flows naturally again, there's a kind of justice you can hear in the sound of the creek itself. This story is over, but lessons remain. For anyone facing a similar fight, stand firm, protect your legacy, and respect the land. History will be on your side if you are on the right side of law and nature.